It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show as we continue the coverage from the AIAG SCAC Supply Chain and Quality Conference in North Charleston, South Carolina. AIAG, Automotive Industry Action Group, SCAC, the South Carolina Automotive Council. This conference is dedicated to the world of automotive, and we've been meeting with many of the leading industry thought leaders that are participating, and that continues with this interview here today. Big thanks to our conference broadcast sponsor, the Effective Syndicate, for making our coverage possible. The Effective Syndicate helps companies win by optimizing process and developing winning cultures. You can learn more at theeffectivesyndicate.com. Quick programming note, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you find your podcasts. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. All right, so let's welcome in our co-host here today, Mr. Singh and Greg White, co-host here at Supply Chain Now Radio, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't believe you just gave me up like that.
Yeah.
Serial singer,
entrepreneur, whatever. Yeah.
Tech leader.
We continue to expand your title.
Thank you.
And we continue to uncover some of your attributes and skills that we haven't seen in the previous months. So maybe
ever.
His card,
you'll sing us out this afternoon on this episode.
His card's now a trifold, just so you get the whole title across.
Someone once said, "The longer your title, the less important your job."
That was a wise person.
My title just continues to get longer.
I don't know what that says.
Well, what is inarguable is we have had a series of outstanding interviews here today. Great conference. And you also heard Bo Groover, my other co-host, founder, president of the Effective Syndicate. And Bo, of course, co-hosts our Popular Leadership Matters series here on Supply Chain Now Radio. Bo, how you doing?
I'm doing just right. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And so let's welcome in our featured guest today, because I think this interview is going to stand out from a lot of the others, where we've got a trade policy subject matter expert. And if anything, if we are uncovering and trying to better understand things in the global business environment, is certainly trade these days. So Bridget Matheson, Director of North American Manufacturing for Arent Fox. How you doing, Bridget?
I am fine, and I am delighted to be here. Thank you very much. The right conference at the right time and the right subject matter.
And you just barely made it.
And I just barely made it. Thank you.
So,
thank you, Delta.
And
that's right.
Outstanding airline, and I love some of their commercials here lately. Of course, their marketing team has been good at it for a while. But you've been here. This is at least your second, if not your third conference,
That's right.
Bridget. And we're gonna get some of your insights on what brings you here. But before we do all that, if you would tell us about yourself and kind of your background.
Sure. Some of your listeners, maybe many of your listeners, might be interested to know that I started my career way back when the ice was melting somewhere in Denmark as a customs inspector along the Canada-U.S. border many years ago. And I eventually married my husband, who was my U.S. counterpart at that port of entry along the Quebec-Vermont border. I immigrated to Canada. So my marriage is the bilateral relationship.
You started international trade with your marriage.
That's right.
That's awesome.
I love that.
So I was a customs inspector for a number of years. But anyways, in terms of trade policy, I worked at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, particularly post-NAFTA, if anybody ever remembers that acronym,
yes.
1994.
Yes, the giant sucking sound.
That's right.
Ross
and
Perot.
That's right. And I mention that because what we're going to talk about later on in this podcast is, well, what the heck has happened to NAFTA and what's happened since, and why does anybody care? And anyways, I joined Arent Fox. It's a law firm in Washington, D.C., and we're pretty unique in that we have a policy director just for the automotive and the manufacturing sector. And in today's time, we work very closely with the automotive associations in Canada, the United States, and Mexico on the ratification of the USMCA and all that good stuff.
So that's a little bit about your organization and your role at Arent Fox. Tell us more about that.
I connect the dots. So trade policy and trade agreements are a legal pact. It's a gazillion pages long, and the fine print's another gazillion pages. And it takes a pretty special kind of person within a company to take ownership of what the heck a trade agreement means for that company.
Yeah.
But the world does not operate in a vacuum. Nothing does. And there's lots of circles sort of flying around our global space called trade policy. There's trade agreements, there's tariff policies, there's tweets from Washington. So what I do for our clients is I get to know who they are and what they do and what they want to do, where they make it, how they make it, from where do they make it, and I connect the dots in terms of this is your risk area. And this is how you might want to mitigate that risk, because trade policy today is all about risk mitigation, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we have seen, and we do a wide variety of programming, in-person programming like we've got coming up on September 20th in Atlanta, to webinars, to a ton of podcasts and other mediums. And it seems like to me there has been in recent years such a huge new refound corporate interest in risk mitigation. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. You've actually nailed it. The reason why I mentioned NAFTA in 1994, how many decades ago was that? But for the last 25 years, especially in North America, but globally as well, international trade has not risen to the fore. It's sort of been on the back burner. We've all lived with our trade agreements, whether it be, the NAFTA or another trade agreement. And tariffs, the duties, zero, single digits, 2.3, 5%, nothing that's going to scare a CEO out of his bed at night. And so things were ticking along pretty well. So what we heard among the industry was all about price competition, industry trends like self-driving cars, all that really sexy and exciting stuff we all want to talk about. And all of a sudden, bang, we are now 2019 and we're talking tariffs and duties. And we're talking duties not at 2.5%, we're talking duties 15, 25, and 30%. That goes directly to the bottom line. And so, poof, we have a new risk factor in SEC filings all of a sudden.
Exciting times we live in, huh?
Yeah, it is.
So this event, though, switching gears a little more on a much more positive note, this event, we've been talking throughout the episodes here as we provide live coverage, is that in this era of digital information where you have all of the information at our fingertips on our PCs or our phones at home, it's still so important to get out and shake hands and sit down with folks and compare notes, and that interpersonal side is just still really important. Would you agree with that, Bridget?
Yes. Every company is different. Every product is different. Every supply manager is different, and every CEO or CFO for that supply manager is going to be different. Some companies are more comfortable with uncertainty. Some companies like uncertainty because they find competitive advantage, which is very true.
Where there's chaos, there's profit.
Exactly. Right. So one of the things that I like to do because of the nature of my job is I like to come to these kinds of events, talk to people, get to understand their companies. I always learn something new. And when I learn something new, it's a best practice for someone else.
Great. Well put. So what do you look most forward to at this event? I mean, clearly learning and learning something new, and then being able to, what I heard you say there is being able to share that with your clients and prospective clients. I can appreciate that. What else are you going to leave here with, you think?
Yeah. One of the things that I hope to get out of my conversations, either with, in the hallways or in the hotel lobby, or a phone call to me after the conference, is a couple of things. One, what's your anxiety level? Like, is this really a train wreck coming at you? Do you know if it's a train wreck coming at you.
Right.
And what are you doing about it? Number two. And number one. And number two, just generally speaking, what is the knowledge level of these companies? There is so much to take in. It is mind-boggling. I do this, 7 days a week. And this morning, on the flight here was a tweet from the White House that changes something dramatically for everyone who's going to be in this room tomorrow morning, and for your for your listeners here today. And so things are very fast-paced, but they at those consequences, everyone needs to know and make the right decisions accordingly.
Absolutely. Great.
Right.
Well said. Boom.
So your background, Bridget, is interesting and fascinating, and I imagine that it's constantly changing. So what are some of the trends that you're watching or aware of, or maybe even worried about over the foreseeable horizon?
So I walked in this morning and I grabbed a cup of coffee at this conference on this beautiful site called the Technical Center.
Yes.
What's the name of this?
Trident Technical
College.
I think of Poseidon.
Exactly. How could I have forgotten that name? And I grabbed a cup of coffee after my long flights, and I sat down in the audience, and bingo, the first speaker was from an OEM, representative from an OEM. And what did he talk about? He talked about localization. He talked about versus globalization. He talked about supply chain and where his OEM is going to open up the next plant. That's exactly the kind of the kind of conversation every CEO and CFO is having today. And my question to him, if I can find him in the audience later on this afternoon, is, and if he were my client, this is what I would have asked him. What decisions and what factors are you now taking into consideration to site your next production plant? Usually it's tax policy, real estate prices,
right.
Help, from
transportation access.
Absolutely, all that good stuff.
Right.
Are those factors the same factors today, or are you adding to that list?
Okay.
And where do you, OEM, because the tier ones are going to follow the OEM,
Absolutely.
Maybe even the tier twos, if you're not in country A now, what's going to make you change your decision? And specifically in terms of China, putting the elephant in the room into this conversation, what are you doing about China? You're buying from China, you're selling to China. What are you doing about China? Or you are in a joint venture in China.
Right.
What are those decision factors that are going to make you change? And so what I like to do, Bo, is just help people ask the right questions of themselves.
Okay, great.
I like that. I really like that. Good question asking is not often thought about in the business landscape these days when everyone's moving so fast. But if you're not asking the right questions,
You certainly aren't getting the right answers.
That's right. Yeah. And so
you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Also, one other thing I picked up there, and Greg, I know you've got an interesting question to ask Bridget, but clearly you are passionate about finding the information to bring back to the businesses where you are serving as a trusted advisor. And, there's a doggedness there to tracking down the information you need. We kind of talked about this in the last episode. Mm-hmm. But to keep and retain that title as trusted advisor, you can't sit on what you learned 7 years ago, or much less 7 months ago, right?
Right.
And that's really what I'm picking up from what you're sharing with us.
Yeah, and exactly. And the only thing that I would add to that is who else needs to know. So if I could just bear with me, I'll give you an example. A client of ours is a major tier one, and they're headquartered in the Detroit area. And it's a brand name company. We all know who they are. And their general counsel, whom usually is our first point of contact, it's usually the general counsel who realizes, we're in murky waters. My CEO and my board of directors or my shareholders are starting to ask questions about trade, and I don't know anything about trade. He asked us to come to their headquarters in the Detroit area. And for an entire afternoon, my colleague and I sat around a conference room with 20 people from that company. And they were smart enough. They were so on the ball that they had at the table, not just the C-suite, they had their sales department, they had their purchasing, their procurement, their transportation, their regional sales department, their sourcing, financing, accounting, etc. And for an afternoon, my colleague and I sat there and we fielded questions from them. Okay. And those questions were all started out with the two words, what if? Because we're living in a situation now of what if. It's so uncertain. It was fascinating. It was fascinating for us. It was fascinating for them. And we ended that afternoon with a clear understanding. These are the uncertain things we do not know. We just don't know yet.
Right.
Rules haven't been written, a bunch of reasons, okay? Here's what we know that we don't know. And here's what we need to watch. And it was, I hope, a refreshing exercise well worth its time.
Well, it sounds like good on them for having such a cross-functional team.
Yes.
It's not just the C-suite executives, but it's a cross-functional slice of the organization.
And especially
everybody's
some
concerned.
of the organizations you named, for them to be at the table for such a strategic discussion,
that bodes well.
Yeah.
For that organization, that bodes well.
A very mature approach.
Right.
Yeah. So you have your kind of finger on the pulse of what's going on in trade, and I think it's interesting what you're seeing and what you've already seen here, even though you've only been here for just a few hours. But I'm really interested to see, one of the things we're asking people today is give us your sort of crystal ball view into the future, right?
It's murky. It's cloudy, that crystal ball. I wish I could tell you this is what's going to happen in 2 months and 6 months, and this is what's going to, I don't know. And anyone who tells you they do doesn't have their finger on the pulse. Washington, D.C. right now is a shifting, in terms of trade policy, a shifting arena. So what I see in the next year and a half, up to the 2020 elections, I'll just be quite obvious, is whether or not the United States and Washington continues to use the blunt instrument of increased tariffs to enforce their trade agreements, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see that changing. I don't see much vigorous debate in Congress that counters it. There's a lot of talk. There's always a lot of talk in Washington. But I don't see any great champion to counter it. And so that's on tariffs. The other major development that the audience here and your listeners will be interested in, of course, is the USMCA ratification.
Right.
I'll talk quite a bit about that tomorrow morning in my presentation, but suffice here to say is Congress is back in session. They've been back this week. They had their summer August work recess. They have not many days before this legislative session ends. There is already talk about tweaking the agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, the new NAFTA. I would not be surprised if the USMCA was ratified, i.e. approved by Congress before the end of this year. And that starts the clock ticking on a whole new set of rules for any operation that's in North America. So I was long in my answer. The short answer is uncertainty. But remember, uncertainty can bring opportunity. Don't wait until that ball has fallen.
Is there any, considering the uncertainty, maybe even what you think the outcome is, or have been advised what the outcome could be, whichever way policy goes, is there any guidance that you're giving companies that are asking you the what if questions today?
So it depends on what the landscape is, who you're doing business with.
Yeah.
Who are you buying to?
What
who are you buying
countries?
from? So all of that. So once we've, because if you're not doing business in China, well, then I'm not going to talk to you about 301 tariffs. But if you're buying aluminum or steel components that originated in China and you're a tier 2, all of a sudden your tier 1 is really, really interested on what's happening between Beijing and Washington, D.C.
Right.
So again, it's after about a 10-minute conversation with the company that we kind of understand what the scope of the interest is and the risk. So I think that USMCA, I give it a pretty good chance of ratification. U.S. Beijing trade talks, they've said they're going to get back together again in the next week or so. That one, I will not tell you. I won't lay odds. I just won't. The other thing that's out on the forecast, and your poor listeners are going to want to be jumping out of their cars by now if I haven't caught.
Or gyms.
Exactly. Is new tariffs, brand new tariffs on the automotive industry particularly. And by November, next a month or so, we'll know what the White House thinking is on that. I'm trying to think desperately for some good news.
Yes, we need more good news for sure.
Help me.
But let me go back.
I think on the trade, I think on the trade front, it's really hard to declare any news one way or the other because it is very murky right now. Right? We'll see more.
Yeah, I think we need to our listeners to go back. So USMCA is the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. Mexico is the only country to ratify it thus far. It takes all 3 countries.
Yep.
And once it's ratified, it stays in place 16 years. You have the opportunity to renew again at that point in time.
Yeah.
So I know we love our acronyms in supply chain. I had to refresh my memory on exactly what that was.
We call it the new NAFTA.
Yeah, the new NAFTA. Yeah, that's right. And I think probably a lot of our listeners might better connect with that term. I appreciate there is lots of uncertainty, and while there is some good news, certainly, down here in North Charleston, and when we plug in with a lot of what's going on in the business community here in South Carolina, of course, we're based in the Atlanta area. There's a lot of good news. Georgia and South Carolina, both those states have really gotten their plan together and just are out there winning business, bringing it back. And while that's great for the states, but it's also great regionally, right? Especially as we know in automotive, you have the clustering effect, right? Much like aerospace.
Yeah, exactly. And you've just sparked something.
Sure.
I
haven't heard that in 27 years, so you made my day.
Welcome to Charleston. In the new NAFTA, the local, regional North American content level in the automotive sector is higher than in the new NAFTA. So what does that mean? Is that to gain the benefit of a zero duty, to save lots and lots of billions of dollars every year in duty savings, the OEMs are going to ask their tier 1s, what is the percentage of your component part, your brake, your console, your chassis, your tire wheel, that is made of North American content? That content level is now higher. That could be further down the road, a North American competitive edge vis-a-vis our trading partners around the globe.
You're saying that in the new NAFTA, the requirement is higher?
Yes.
So it was 70?
No. It was, depending on what the part was, it was 30, 40%, maybe
but now it's
a little
32
higher.
or 45.
It's in the 60s.
Oh.
Yeah, it's quite,
Okay. Okay. Wow, that is good. And that's to classify it as a North American or American or whatever, Canadian.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's a North American, right?
The North American.
Yeah.
That's right. You can source your aluminum from North America to make a tire rim and you add things to your tire rim, and if that tire rim is made up of more than or higher than that North American content, you can claim a new NAFTA tariff preference, which your OEM is going to be seeking because your OEM doesn't want to pay the
cost
duty.
reduction.
And it's a cost reduction. It's a revenue savings.
Yeah.
Now, the rules to get to that definition of a local content is a subject of another 1-hour podcast. But
So stay tuned.
That's going to require one of your
More to
attorneys. Yeah.
thank you, Delta.
So
Those frequent flyer miles coming.
that's right. So Bridget, I mean, you are a walking, living, and breathing resource. So I'm sure some of our listeners are going to want to reach back out and have some follow-up questions for you. So how can folks get in touch with you, Bridget?
Sure. The best way is to just Google me at Arent Fox, ARENTFOX.com. And it's Birgit Matheson, Matthiesen. And if you do that, not only do you get my contact information, but you can subscribe to our free trade alerts that we put out. Well, now we're putting them out like once a week now. We have a particular automotive practice focus. So all these tariff things that we've been talking about, and you can subscribe to them and hopefully learn from them.
Absolutely.
Great.
Nice.
Well, thanks so much for taking some time out. I'm looking forward to your breakout session tomorrow, 8:05. You're the leadoff hitter.
Bring your coffee.
I have a feeling you will keep people awake.
I'm confident.
I am too.
For sure.
Federal Trade Policy Update with Bridget Matheson, Director, North American Automotive with Arent Fox. Looking forward to that. Thanks so much for your time today. And stick around just for a minute as we wrap up, because we want to invite, just like Bridget shared some resources you can tap into, we'll try to include any of those links into the dedicated show notes. So I think we've already collected some information from you to make it easier for folks to find these resources in this ever rapidly changing global business environment. Okay, on that note, we want to touch on a couple of quick events that we are driving.
That's
and
right.
We'll start with Bo Groover on September 20th. What's coming up around the corner?
Yes, so we're excited. We're going to be co-hosting an event with an Emory professor named Robert Kazanjian, and it's in Atlanta, and we're going to be talking about the elements of a good strategy and the elements of good execution. So we believe that if you get both of those elements working together, you're going to experience some pretty positive success. So if you're interested, please reach out.
Connect. You can shoot us a note to connect@supplychainradio.com. And Bridget, you may be familiar with the firm that's hosting that September 20th event, Arnold, Golden & Gregory, which is based, I think they have an office in Washington, D.C. as well, but they're based in Atlanta.
Oh, I see.
One of the big firms there, right off the connector. And then coming up next year, hey, we're rolling the punches here today. We knew Bridget would fit right in.
Yeah,
She was
get her
doing
a permanent chair.
Yes. And so, Greg, coming up on October 9th, our friends at the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance has got a big event. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Georgia Manufacturing Summit at the Cobb Galleria in Atlanta, GA.
Yep.
So 1,000 attendees, representing about 10,000 Georgia manufacturers and the companies that do business with them. A number of great speakers. You two are both doing a panel session. I'm going to do a live broadcast, and we are going to have, and you'll love this, Bridget, we're going to have a couple of foreign trade ministers.
Oh, my heavens.
I'll have to tell you who off air because it's still a bit of a secret.
It hasn't been unveiled yet.
Yes.
It's top secret.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Jason Moss and his group have put together a great set of discussions there.
And we got to give a big thanks to the facilitator of these interviews we got coming up, Albert Sorta, a big friend of the show. He's been on before.
Yes.
Formerly with the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which is an awesome organization growing rapidly in Georgia. But looking forward to your interviews and our panel sessions, of course, the event in general, October 9th. And you can learn more at GeorgiaManufacturingAlliance.com. A lot more events to cover, including the 2019 Logistics CIO Forum in Austin, Texas in November. Trade shows galore in 2020. But check out on our events tab at supplychainnowradio.com. You can learn more about any of these events. Or, like we mentioned, shoot us a note to connect@supplychainnowradio.com. And we'll do our best to connect you with the information and resources you're after.
That's what we do at Connect.
That's right. All right. So thank you, Bridget Matheson, Director North American Manufacturing with Arent Fox, Bo Groover, our kind AIAG SCAC conference broadcast sponsoring partner. Yeah, we're gonna make some long sentences here.
He just gave you a bigger title.
Long title. I think I'm ratcheting down now. I'm slapping. Sliding.
No, this has been a great start to the 2-day conference here. These interviews like we had with Bridget here today. But thanks for your time, Greg. Always a pleasure. We've got a couple more before we wrap up here today on day one.
Yep.
To our listeners, check us out. Other upcoming events, replays of interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find us again on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, all the leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.